By now, you've probably seen several emails, professional development opportunities, and other activities that we've been doing this fall as it relates around this concept of equity. And I hope through these opportunities that each of you have been able to better understand the equity conversation. For many of us, when we talk about equity, it's natural to go and view it in the lens of culture and ethnicity. But one of the things we hope to do through these professional development exercises is to broaden that view, looking at aspects of our student demographics relative to students who are part-time or full-time, looking at socioeconomic level, looking at ways in which we can even the playing field for all of our students, and also develop techniques and mechanisms within each one of our classrooms that really focusing on meeting that student specifically where they are and being able to develop strategies or interventions that help them be successful. If you remember during our return week for the fall, I did a presentation for Achieving the Dream that really looked at understanding our students from a perspective of student success and then persistence. And if you remember, in the example I showed, if you broke all of our students down to be representative of 10 students, typically 1 out of 10 of those students would withdraw, another 3 would fail. Adding to this, if you looked at these same 10 students, if they're representative of our student population, students who are here in the fall and persist into the spring, upwards of 49% of those students never return. Most shockingly is when you look at fall-to-fall persistence, students that were here in the first fall, and then did they come back in the fall, the percentage is even more shocking. Upwards of 71% students never return. Those type of statistics force us to look at how we're serving students and how we're meeting their needs. And in that regard, the equity discussion becomes very relevant. Let's take a few minutes and watch a short clip by Professor Paul Pasichnyk in the biology department, who recently did a small session for the math faculty on his understanding of equity and how he's embedded equity-related activities and mechanisms within his classroom.
Equity is recognizing differences and accommodating the needs. And so this is, I put this little image of a Band-Aid up to help trigger something in my mind so I would remember how, this example or analogy. So for example, if you have kids, or if you're an elementary school teacher, or you're around a lot of kids, they'll run up to you with like a cut on their arm. And you'll say, okay, I'll give you a Band-Aid. And this Band-Aid helps them in that situation. And then another student might come up and say, I just banged my head. And so you wouldn't put a Band-Aid on them, right? You recognize the differences and you accommodate their needs. So whenever we apply equity into education, we have to, it's not as simple as recognizing differences and accommodating their needs. It's obviously whenever you're recognizing differences and accommodating needs for people in education, you need to frame it within the content that they're trying to learn. And so what I was able to find, there are many different sources that try to describe this, but the main thing, or one of the unifying trends, is that educational equity should state that personal and social circumstances don't limit the student's potential to succeed in that course. So this means that things that they are facing outside of the course should have a limited bearing on how they're capable of succeeding in the course. And so whenever you think of this, one of the issues that have popped up in a lot of places is they don't apply comprehensive standards to all students. There are certain states that have tried to approach equity, but the important thing is all students are held to comprehensive, rigorous standards. Does that make sense? But that their personal and social circumstances should not interfere with their ability to meet those standards. So whenever I was trying to brainstorm this, I think it's important to put in some examples. And so I wanted to think, what are some inequities that our students face? And so these are just a few, and obviously they're not all of them, but these are a few inequities that feed into our students' ability to succeed. And if y'all know Kevin, he was able to point out that my things all made the acronym FEEDS, so it helps remember it maybe a little bit. So also another thing is these aren't mutually exclusive. So some things could impact them in one part of their life and also in another. So I want to go through some examples. So financially, some of our students don't come to us with the same financial background. They can't afford the same books. They can't afford cars to bring them to school. They also can't afford the luxury of not having to work while they're going to school. Sometimes they can't afford the luxury of not having to work just one job. Some of them work multiple jobs. And so this is a big inequity our students face, but their financial platform or their financial stability shouldn't have a bearing on their ability to succeed in our courses. Another one is emotional support. And so this goes back to like that example I saw where in that activity they said, take a step forward if your parents told you you could be what you want to be. And this factors into their emotional support. Some of our students have been told from infants that the sky's the limit. You do whatever you want. You are capable. Other students have not heard this, and they don't have that emotional support whenever they're coming to us as students. Also, some of our students, whenever they go home to a loving family that can talk them through these issues. And they can say, okay, yeah, you've got these 5 exams. I will provide some emotional support and help you out in getting through these exams so you can succeed in school. Some of our students go home to empty households or go home to parents that are working multiple jobs or live by themselves or etc. So their emotional support network is not the same for all of our students. Our students haven't had all the same educational opportunities. Some of our students have just come from high school, and in their high school they had AP courses, or they had very well-established libraries, and they had librarians who were there to help them out. Some of our students didn't come to us with schools with satisfactory libraries. They haven't been provided with the same opportunities. The opportunities that they're lacking educationally does not mean that they are not educationally able. It means that they have lacked the same resources that the other students have had. Disabilities is one that's maybe a little bit easier to understand. We have a lot of students coming to us with accommodations, and they'll provide us the letter, and we can meet their accommodations, and that helps. This does not, or this could include students that have maybe undiagnosed disabilities, or potentially even students with mental health disorders. And so these mental health disorders might impact their ability to succeed in our courses. It does not mean that they're not capable of knowing the material and making their way through it, but it means that they are going to have an inequity or a difficult time overcoming that. And then the last one I put up is social discrimination. And so some of our students, and again, these things also tie into emotional support and some of these others as well, or like educational opportunities. Some of our students have come to college, and they have heard from their young age that college is not your space. College is not for you. And so they do not have the acceptance in college among their social peers. Some of our students, and not necessarily all of our students, but students in general, come to us overcoming social discrimination in their life. And they might walk down campus and feel unwelcome, or walk through the halls and feel unwelcome. And this sets them up differently than the other students who do feel welcome in this space. If they feel unwelcome, will they be as likely to ask questions? Will they be as likely to explain their insecurities? I don't know, right? So these are things that socially could set them up at a different level than other students.
Paul has done a lot of work in the biology department in creating a problem-based learning approach to Biology 1406. And in doing so, his problem-based learning really speaks to the equity conversation, particularly in a very challenging and rigorous discipline as biology. I'd like to turn now to a small interview I did with Nancy Fields, who's our faculty coordinator for geology and environmental science. Nancy, earlier this year, looked at open educational resources as a way in which she could address equity within her classes. What prompted you to go down this pathway relative to open educational resources? And give me a little sense about why you took this approach.
Well, first off, it's something I've been aware of for a while, but I think just the part on my end as far as not wanting to do change, I was kind of content with where we were at. We kind of had a good thing going. I felt like for a while, and I got comfortable with what we were doing. And it was honestly a drop in enrollment. We started seeing that trend over several semesters, and it started getting my attention. But I kept kind of not worrying about it too much. And then finally, I just was hit hard with the fact that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And what do I need to do about that? Something needs to change. I mean, books are very expensive, and what other things are out there, and what can we do differently to start, helping our students out? From the first day of class, just how can I help our students the best as far as being on the same, availability of having those resources where they weren't having to purchase anything extra. We could just all start at the same time rather than some students having to wait several weeks to get their financial aid check or anything else. I wanted to at least provide that. And with our class, the way I designed it, we were using literally about an 800, 900 page textbook, which is really overwhelming for students that don't have that background knowledge. Knowing that's there and they're getting lost in it and they're not even going to read it, I decided to design the course where it was engaging, interactive videos, just shorter content and just more understandable way of reading it and getting the material.
So Nancy, you launched this fall, right?
Piloted actually in the summer. I tested it out and did about 3 courses in the summer and got some really good feedback, and it was a good experience. But as far as going full blown, as far as online, because that was only online, but for in-class and online this fall. So yes, it's brand new. I was a little nervous, being the person to design this and what are the other faculty going to think about it and just the students. And I've heard nothing but positive feedback. And there's really been very little negative anything in comments. They love the content. They talk about how engaging it is, that they're getting, something out of it. I've had several students actually go, I think I want to take more science classes now because of this. So that's huge. Instead of turning it away and being intimidating, they're becoming interested in it. So.
Well, I'm a numbers guy, and I was pleasantly surprised this fall when I was reviewing some of the numbers for all of our disciplines and programs, and environmental science and geology collectively has really made some enrollment impacts, because I know you also publicized that there were OER possibilities in this course, which I think is very attractive to students, and it really helps us at El Centro as well to be able to track students who may not naturally come to El Centro, but if they see these types of services where they really feel like they're getting the most bang for their buck, and then that they've got faculty who are really interested in seeing them reduce their costs, they're self-selecting us, which is pretty exciting.
It is. We went from using like a $300 lab kit basically to dropping the lab kit cost. It's still, like, for environmental science, a hands-on 4-hour lab class, but it's now maybe $20, $30 maybe in materials that they have to get on their own. And most of the stuff is going to be found in their house. And so that's the way we've designed these courses, the labs, is what do you have at home? What is applicable in your own life that you've got going on and that you have available that you can use to do these things, just practical everyday things that teaches science. So
that's great. Nancy, if there was one final thought that you'd like to share with your colleagues relative to kind of not only this project you participated in, but also in general just the equity conversation, what would you share with them?
It was a lot of work over the course of, still kind of working on it and tweaking it over, worked on it all spring, all summer. But it's been so worth it. And so I would say absolutely, if you don't want to do it all in at this point, but what are some small things you can do to make those changes? But, definitely do the research out there. Just fulfilling the needs of our students, helping that way is huge. I'm so glad that we have plunged in and done it, and there's no turning back at this point. So it's so worth it just to help our students out. It's been a lot of work, but it's worth it.
So I know the work that Nancy and Paul and others are doing as it relates to equity are just a small percentage of the great work that everybody's doing relative to this topic. But let me tell you about something I'm really excited about. We've set aside return week for us to offer a very unique faculty workshop. It'll be on Monday, January 8th, and we've invited J. Luke Wood, who is a national speaker, particularly as it relates to men of color, and looking at equity from the lens of culture and ethnicity, particularly in young men of color. So we're really excited to have him here, and during the workshop that day, each of you will have an opportunity to break out in small groups and learn a little more about ways in which you can embed equity-related activities or strategies within your classroom. It should be a really exciting time not only for all of us to get together, but really learn more about this topic so that we can really make some substantive impact in our student success rates, student persistence, and ultimately student completion. So I look forward to this event, look forward to seeing all of you, and we'll be sending out more information shortly as it relates to this faculty workshop.